former candidate for the U.S. Senate, longtime radio talk show host, author, and conservative policy advocate.
Justices to the Supreme Court, the left has been in open panic.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
What is the future of the American Republic? Today we take on that lofty question with our latest B&B panel, the best and brightest, from LibertyNation.com, as we consider how the turbulence and upheaval of these last years has changed not only the hard reality on the ground, but our hopes and expectations for the future. Just how firm or fragile are the foundations of this constitutional republic? We'll focus on the baseline question of election integrity, without which a republic cannot stand. We'll examine the state of our institutions, which came under increasing fire during the Trump era. The live possibility of changes to the rules of Congress, which would make it much easier for the party in power to essentially cancel the minority party. And the question of whether this constitutional republic has morphed into an oligarchy, meaning rule by the few and powerful. And as always, we'll offer up fearless or perhaps fearful predictions of what we might expect over these next 2 to 4 years and beyond. Joining us is our power-packed B&B panel, the best and brightest, from LibertyNation.com. National columnist and Heartland correspondent Sarah Cowgill, socio-political correspondent Jeff Charles, and political columnist Joe Schaeffer. And let's start with you, Joe, and the question of election integrity. We're not going to focus so much on what happened 4 months ago in election 2020, but on what can be done going forward to reverse the seemingly radical loss of confidence in our elections among tens of millions of people. What are the most immediate steps that can be taken, and what is the likelihood that such measures will be implemented by 2022 or 24?
Well, I think it's two key words: state legislatures. Republicans who are rightly upset about what happened in 2020 don't want to see it happen again. You're not going to get concrete action out of the Republicans in the U.S. Congress. They can perform a useful negative role in blocking H.R. 1, the Democrats' insane overreach, which would codify everything they did last November with mail-in voting, drop boxes, online registration for everything, all of that. The U.S. Congress has a role in blocking that, but if you want to affect real change, it's going to happen in the state legislatures, and we're already seeing it. It's no surprise that Florida and South Dakota, with its two prominent governors that are considered rising stars in the Republican Party, have voiced their concern with this. Georgia, which saw, and this was very good for the America First people who want this change, the Republican establishment got burned with that special election, where all those measures that hurt Donald Trump in November, well, it hurt them with the special elections. They lost 2 of their senators on January 5. So Georgia is motivated to enact just logical, meaningful electoral integrity change. So all the real action is going to happen in the state legislatures. This is a very good sign for America First people that do nothing. Congress is not involved here. We're going to have real action on the state level, and I think meaningful change can happen there.
So, Jeff, to you, and to what extent do you think will the steps necessary to restore the perceived integrity of elections need to occur, as Joe said, at the state level as opposed to the federal level? Or is the federal government of today doing its best to usurp the sovereignty of individual states to determine their own laws on voting?
While I do think that there are players in the federal government who would like to usurp this process, it's going to have to happen at the state level. I mean, a lot of times people think that when we elect a president, it's one election that puts him into office. Really, it's 50 different elections that put a president into office. So this has to happen at the state level through state legislatures and what have you. I mean, there's a reason why Senator Rand Paul, after the election, said that he was going to travel to these different states to help them keep people accountable to ensuring the integrity of their state elections. So yes, this definitely will be a state level a process, but you already see the pushback from Democrats in these states. But I do think that, as Joe said, this is a positive sign for the non-establishment America First crowd. We know that the Republican elites in Congress aren't going to do much about this. And I think that's going to have other ramifications going forward. So I do think it'll get better. I think it's going to be a slog. It's going to be an outright brawl to get it done. Not a literal brawl. I'm not inciting violence. I'm just saying that this is going to be a fight. So yeah, I think that's what's going to be coming up down the pike.
So Sarah, out in the Heartland, do people believe that their own disbelief at the outcome of the 2020 election is a harbinger of more inexplicable outcomes, or unique to any election involving an explosively controversial figure like Donald Trump?
Frankly, I think what you're going to be seeing soon enough in red states in the middle of America is that they're receding into the background. I hear all the time, emails, random casual conversations that, they don't trust the election, so why vote? So I think we're going to see a mass exodus from even participating in the voting process, at least from a red state point of view.
The pandemic was used as the predicate for changing a lot of these voting laws in 2020. Does the diminution of the pandemic, Joe, signal a likely relaxation of this full court press to change voting laws?
Well, for those of us who think the pandemic was just something to be manipulated all along, they'll just come up with another crisis when necessary. And this is all manufactured crisis to enact what they want. They got what they want, which is Biden in the White House. And the important thing is the pushback. Like Jeff said, like I said, it's not going to happen from Congress. Mitch McConnell is not going to be leading the red wall against the Biden administration, which he is far more aligned with than he ever was to Donald Trump's America First movement. I think the smartest move by Trump here, and I really hope he does it, is to, he's got this giant sun ball of energy. Shine that on the states. Let the Republican Congress just wither in the shade of his lack of attention for them, and focus on individual state assembly members as state senators who are leading the charge to enact this legislation. It performs two things. It helps get these election integrity measures that are needed in, and it helps cultivate future United States senators, United States House members. So he's killing two birds with one stone.
We're going to be focused coming back on the state of our American institutions.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
As we continue with our B&B panel, the best and brightest from LibertyNation.com, we continue our examination of the future of the Republic with Sarah Cowgill, Jeff Charles, and Joe Schaeffer. And let's talk about the state of our American institutions, the Congress, courts, media, military, civil society, corporate America, and the growing specter of increasingly dominant big tech, social media. Jeff, let's focus first on the Fourth Estate, as it used to be called, which Donald Trump famously dubbed the fake news media. Was their takedown of Trump more a singular effort to destroy a uniquely threatening figure, merely a continuation of the same media bias we've witnessed for decades, or an indication that all the traditional rules of objective journalism are gone forever?
The answer is yes to all three of those.
I'm sorry, I didn't provide you a D, all of the above.
Yeah, no, it is definitely all of the above. I mean, we've seen that the media has been biased for decades, right? But the thing is, there was just always a left-wing bias. Over the past 5 years, it's gone from bias to full-on out assault. There is a reason why I refer to them as the activist media. They don't deserve to be called news outlets. I call them the activist media. I call them media activists. People like Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo, they are activists. They are not journalists. And the fact that Time magazine felt so bold as to write an article bragging about how the media worked hand in hand with the Democratic Party and left-wing operatives to take down Trump shows that they had definitely a vendetta against Trump, possibly because they saw him as being somebody who would be more effective at carrying out the conservative agenda. So yeah, I mean, it's all of the above, and I think from here on out, it's only going to get worse. I mean, and that article in Time magazine showed that it's going to get worse because they're not even trying to hide it anymore.
Yeah, they're not even trying to hide it. They're in fact proclaiming it. They're proud of it. They wear it as a badge of honor. Yeah. Now, Sarah, it seems the power of the entrenched forces of the federal government has been given an enormous boost by the growing power of social media, which is now unapologetically, just as much as traditional media, censoring or canceling conservatives. Does this power signal the death knell for the conservative agenda? Or will it incite conservatives to action which can somehow neutralize Facebook, Twitter, and all the rest?
Well, what I've noticed, just in my own little circle of conservative and, more independent libertarian friends, they're not on Facebook anymore. They're not on Twitter anymore. They have switched to different platforms. I mean, they just disappeared. So I do believe that there will be a resurgence. And as soon as it gels, I mean, right now, all these new platforms are too new and nobody can understand how to use them. And, people of a certain age, we're like, what the heck? How do you get from here to there and the other thing? So I think once it gels, I think you'll see an uprising again on social media where they feel they have the ability to speak freely and not worry about having fact checkers send through their every last word. Oh, that's not quite what you're talking about. You're a little bit wrong. Here's Steve White. I mean, nobody likes that. And so people have just stopped talking politics. If they're still on Facebook just to throw pictures out there and plan high school reunions, they're not talking politics anymore on Facebook. People are posting about it. Like news outlets are posting, but people have just stopped posting. They've stopped talking and they've gone other places. So I don't think you're going to see the conservatives bow out as much as, fall back 10, regroup, huddle up, figure out what to do next, and then march forward. I just see it taking a little bit of time.
Joe, let's turn to you. Though we don't give the concept much thought, America was built on a foundation of a civil society. Voluntary associations, formal and informal, from what clubs you want to join to what people you choose to spend time with, has always undergirded our way of life, if not defined it. How would you assess the state of civil society, broadly speaking, and its relationship to government circa 2021?
Yeah, I'm seeing some very disturbing things, and I'd like to focus on the civil discourse. What Jeff and Sarah just said, big box media, big tech, these are instruments of oppression too. But we're seeing individual human behavior that is disturbing. Story just the other day, this was in Canada, Toronto, but as we all know, not far removed from America culturally, what's happening here today. A Catholic it was at a Catholic school board meeting, not a public school, a Catholic school board meeting. A Catholic parent spoke out against the LGBT flag being flown in Catholic schools, what the Catholic Church considers homosexuality a sin. For this, a police investigation was conducted against him for a hate crime. A Toronto City Council member accused him of wanting to drown homosexuals because he made a reference to what Jesus Christ says in the gospel about tying a millstone around your neck if you lead children astray. So what concerns me with that story is the viciousness of it. And we like to think, it's fragility, it's snowflakes, but it's really not becoming that anymore. It's becoming cruelty. And what I liken it to is the new voyeurism. This is a base instinct in human beings that really needs to be suppressed. In the past, voyeurism was we get excited and titillated about these sexual scandals. Well, we've become a nation, a culture of dirty sheet sniffers today. But it's not sexual shenanigans that we're focused on. It's bad words and racism and destroying people's lives with this just to get a cheap thrill, apparently. To me, the lesson of Covington was never about fragile snowflakes. It was about this drive-by assault on this high school kid. It was a pile-on. It was people peeping into windows and pointing out this poor kid. They didn't like the way he looked on his face. This is all very dangerous. We need to understand that you can hate the things that I believe in. You have that right. I want you to have that right. What you can't do is use that to discriminate against me in a public forum. But I was raised Catholic. You can hate the Catholic Church. That you have that private right. And I don't think people understand that anymore. They really don't understand that anymore. And that scares the hell out of me.
It seems like half the nation is, in effect, acting as a resistance to reality on the ground. Do you see it that way, Jeff?
We have a culture now that makes it okay to mistreat somebody if you believe that they said something that was bigoted or inappropriate. It's a way to virtue signal, and it's a way to get attention and to get people to give you plaudits.
Okay, with that note, we'll take a quick break, then come back with our B&B panel. As we consider the lofty subject of the future of our republic, we'll discuss possible changes to the rules of Congress, which would make it even easier for the party in power to essentially cancel the minority party.
Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Mark Angelides, Sarah Cowgill, Tim Donner, and Scott Cosenza, and this is Liberty Nation.
Now let's take a look at the LibertyNation.com electoral leaderboard. It's still 238 for Joe Biden.
What if stories and legends can offer us the key to unraveling the hottest political issues of the day and apply their lessons to understanding the chaos of modern politics?
Impeach 45!
Only where freedom of speech is honored can people who look, sound, or think differently be truly free.
If you're discussing something that's difficult, the probability that you're not going to offend each other is zero.
President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump is now president.
With one click, Liberty Nation delivers tomorrow's news.
And remember, liberty.
Today.
All the time and everywhere.
LibertyNation.com. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
As we continue with our B&B panel, the best and brightest from LibertyNation.com, we continue our examination of the future of the Republic with national columnist and Heartland correspondent Sarah Cowgill, socio-political correspondent Jeff Charles, and political columnist Joe Schaeffer. It became clear from the first hour of the Biden administration that executive decrees, officially called executive orders, would be the coin of the realm over these next 4 years. This 46th president has shattered all records for use of the executive fiat. But unbeknownst to many, the live possibility exists of changes to the rules of Congress, which would make it even easier for the party in power to essentially cancel the minority party. Add it up, and we're looking at more command and control sought by the federal government than ever. And Sarah, Democrats want to end the long-standing Senate filibuster whereby 60 votes are required in the ordinary legislative process for a bill to become law. How far do you believe the Democrats would go if they succeed in terminating the filibuster, packing the Supreme Court, adding new states, radical climate change legislation, what?
Yeah, all the way to the crash site. They'll go till they can't go any further. We've seen that. We've heard it. They've been talking about it. They've been talking about packing the courts because of Kavanaugh. They've been talking about climate change, re-enlisting in the Paris Accord so we can just pay more money, throw good money after bad for something we're not really, we're one of the leading, climate responsible countries in the world. Yet here we are paying for everybody else. I think they will go as far as they can until somebody stops them. And the only people that seem to be able to stop them, well, number one, it was Trump in 2016, but now you're looking at a free-for-all. You've got a rubber stamp, administration at this point. We could do all sorts of damage in the next 2 years and beyond. Because I do not see 2022 coming out in the favor of the conservatives.
Joe, the Senate was instituted by the framers of the Constitution as the upper chamber of Congress that would cool the passions of the day, so to speak, that were expressed by the lower chamber, the House. Does it still function as such? Did it ever? And how would the institution change if the filibuster was eliminated altogether?
Yeah, the filibuster is just not as exciting to me as an issue because I just can't go along with that part of this is the world's greatest deliberative body. Look at the people we have in the United States Senate. These are not the sharpest brains in America today. Kirsten Gillibrand, Amy Klobuchar, Tom Tillis, Mitt Romney. Are these the best and the brightest? I don't think so. Have we ever had the best and the brightest? Certainly not in my lifetime.
Only on this panel.
I was coming of age a long, long time ago, and I remember who was in the United States Senate: Ted Kennedy, Chris Dodd, Bob Packwood. Come on, this was not a bunch of Greek philosophers sitting around in Athens dazzling us all with their genius. And, go back in history, and you know this better than I do, Tim, but weren't they caning each other in the 1850s? So, it wasn't, this lofty discourse.
Well, they had a duel, for heaven's sake. Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton had a duel, which resulted in the death of one of them in the House chamber.
I always thought it was more myth than reality with that, and it's especially laughable today when we all know we have the worst. This country has the worst political hacks, I think, in the history of democracy. We just have these avaricious, ambitious, dull, shallow ladder climbers, and the idea that the filibuster is going to preserve their sacred right to discourse, it just doesn't fly at all. And I think what we really need is more contempt for Congress today. I think that is a healthy instinct by the American people. So I don't want to hear this lofty stuff. We should have contempt for these people because we have contemptible people in Congress right now.
Jeff, you get to follow Joe, and that's not an enviable position, but one of the first things that comes to mind about eliminating the filibuster is that it will ultimately backfire on the Democrats, as it did when Harry Reid got rid of the filibuster for judges in lower federal courts, thus enabling Mitch McConnell to take the next step when the GOP gained control and abolished the filibuster for the Supreme Court, without which none of the three Trump appointees to the high court could have or would have been confirmed. Is this move to essentially cancel Republicans a short-sighted view by the left, or a clever way to capitalize on the control they have over the federal government, which they know will not last?
Well, actually, I'd like to cede my time back to Joe because what he said is like the most important part of this thing. Even the question that you just asked illustrates what Joe is saying. And it's kind of surprising to me because it's usually Republicans in government who are short-sighted and refuse to play the long game. They're usually making this stupid mistake. But with this particular issue, it's the Democrats who are making the stupid decision. Now, on one hand, it might seem smart because, like you said, if they were to get rid of the filibuster, they can ram through as much as they possibly can. The thing is, though, is that stuff can be reversed because you took out the filibuster, so it's really not as smart as they think it is.
So I want to pull a WWFT. What would the founders think, or what would the framers think of a system where in both the House and the Senate you need only a simple majority to get legislation passed? as opposed to the current system where we have a simple majority only required in the House, but a supermajority, so to speak, 60 in the Senate, because they didn't describe in the Constitution. There's no clause in the Constitution about how the House or the Senate should vote about majorities and filibusters and that kind of thing.
They would want the constitutional republic. They didn't want a democracy. They wanted a democratic process, but they didn't want a democracy. They didn't want the half of the world to be able to take the other half's stuff, if that's, going to put it down and really boil it down to nothing. But, they were smart. They put together a system that protected the minorities. They protected the ruling class. They protected, everybody in between the big cities, the rural areas, the small towns. They designed a well-oiled, constitutional republic. The founders are drinking heavily beyond the veil and probably doing a lot of face palms right now. I can't even imagine what they would think if they were here.
Let's look at the way the U.S. Senate was originally meant to function, since we're talking about our founders' wishes. It was the state legislatures would elect the senators, and that was meant to have the senators really be representative of the interests of the states that they are a part of. What do these senators really represent today? Just more federal entrenched power. Congress is a federal entity from stem to root now, and that includes the United States Senate. So all of this, and the Democrats are wise to see it, this is all about federal power over state power. Whatever works in the moment, as Jeff was saying, the Democrats are good at realizing this. Whatever works at the moment is what they're for. And Republicans need to be more about this. But I also think it helps them in the long run. Go back to the states. Get things through state legislatures. Build your red wall on the state level and protect the influence and power that states have over our overbearing federal government. That is how you check the power of these out-of-control Democrats, the Biden administration, and it solves really all of these problems moving forward.
Joe Schaeffer with yet another example of why we call this our best and brightest panel. We're going to be back with one more shot at these folks. As we continue to consider the future of the Republic, we're going to invoke the O word. Is America becoming an oligarchy?
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
As we continue with one final shot at our B&B panel, the best and brightest from LibertyNation.com, we continue our examination of the future of the Republic with Sarah Cowgill, Jeff Charles, and Joe Schaeffer. One of these days, pretty soon, we might start calling it the O word, because the United States appears headed down the path of oligarchy. It's that gray area between democracy and despotism, ruled by the few and powerful. Exhibit A would be Russia and Vladimir Putin, who was bold enough to simply throw his political opponent in jail on trumped-up charges. Iran, China, Saudi Arabia also come to mind. Oligarchy is something that can and does occur in both democracies and dictatorships. A ruling elite effectively directing the ship of state. Joe, has America become an oligarchy?
Oh, we've been there for some time, really since the beginnings of the first Bush senior administration started staring us that way. And I always thought the best comparison is the Soviet Union in the 1980s when it was starting to crumble. You saw clearly that there was no idealism anymore. The communist ideology was just a way to keep this pack of elites in power for a little while longer. They didn't really care about what was best for the country or for the people. Well, we are seeing that clearly in America today. Our politicians do not care for the best interests of America. They care for their own best interests and the corporate donors who allow them to to have the luxurious lifestyle that they have. So there is this sharp disconnect between our government and the people. I've been writing about this here at Liberty Nation since 2018. Brezhnev's Russia gave way to these aging, decrepit oligarchs is the word. Chernenko gets in there, he drops dead, Andropov drops dead. And what do we have? I don't think it's too cool to say it. We have Joe Biden in there, aged, falling apart, representing this system. I'm full of optimism in one way, because he is going to open so many eyes into how this system is really crumbling. It's falling apart. How can you maintain control when you so clearly do not care about the people that you are meant to serve?
So, Jeff, it seems many of the framers of the Constitution actually had little faith that the radical system of self-government they instituted almost 250 years ago would last beyond a generation or two. Is oligarchy what they feared, or was their fear more about the tyranny of the majority, like the old saying, 2 lions and a lamb voting on what to have for dinner?
In reality, they feared that a group of powerful people could hold sway over what the country does and what the country believes. And when it comes to oligarchy, in American society today, there is no better example of oligarchy than what we're seeing with big tech. I mean, we've got the government that has their agenda, but big tech has grown so powerful that it can literally influence the result of an election. It can determine public opinion. It can determine what we think, what we see, what we feel. They have such insight into our desires and what we want, especially when they use it for marketing purposes. But we've seen them already using this for politics. I mean, in that Time magazine article that I mentioned, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg had leftist activists over at his house to have dinner to talk about the moderation policies, aka censorship. So yeah, and then you have people from the government, when they step down, they go to work at big tech companies, and vice versa. There's this back and forth. There's this pipeline between these big tech companies and the government, and there can be no doubt that big tech is intent on using their influence to push a political agenda, not just a revenue agenda.
Well, Sarah, it seems like the good folks in the Heartland have not considered the term oligarchy. They didn't consider that when they voted Donald Trump into the White House. But is it not fair to say that they definitely were driven by their belief that power had been seized by a small number of distant and unaccountable elites?
Absolutely. I mean, you brought people out. I mean, Donald Trump brought people out of the woodwork. They felt they finally had somebody who wasn't going to be a part of the problem. He was going to be a solution. And they have been feeling left out, lower rung of the totem pole for a long time. So oligarchy, I mean, that might not be the word they use because, it's a little bit bigger than, just deep state. But I think you're seeing that they've already known that this has been going on and on and on, and somebody was going to give them hope to get out from under this. And, I think he tried his best, but when it comes down to it, the Heartland, they're in a quandary. I don't think they know which way is up right now, but they do know that they don't have an effective voice at the moment.
As we look at the future of the Republic, each of you, are you on balance more optimistic or pessimistic? It can be 51-49 or 60-40 or 70-30, but are you on balance, Joe, more optimistic or pessimistic about the future of the Republic than you were, say, 2 years ago?
Well, this is going to sound contradictory, but it makes perfect sense to my crazy mind. I think that we have never been in more peril, and I'm optimistic for that reason. People needed to be woken up. I think actually, when I say peril, the greatest threat was Americans slumbering as they were slowly losing their freedom. And now it's being put right before their face. And that's a good thing, but it is a very dangerous time.
Jeff, optimistic or pessimistic on balance for the future of the Republic?
Like the saying goes, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Under this administration, we are going to see the federal government try to usurp as much power from the states as they possibly can. This will be even worse if Joe Biden doesn't serve out his full first term, and he steps down and Kamala Harris gets into the Oval Office. That's going to accelerate it. But the good thing about this is that there are already people who are already kind of fed up with this whole thing, with our federal government being ineffectual and only seeking power. Especially on the right, I think it's going to trigger something positive as far as getting conservatives into Congress who will actually do what they say they're going to do and stop the socialist agenda and push for more conservative solutions. I think it's going to take a while. It's going to take over the next 2, 4, maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. But we are going to see the Democrats do as much as they possibly can to make the federal government more powerful. But then that backlash needs to come right after that, and that's what I'm hoping for.
Sarah, optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, right now it's looking pretty grim. I think we're on the downhill slide of the roller coaster, and once we hit the bottom, we have nowhere to go but up. I don't know how long that is going to take, but I don't think it's going to be 2022. So I'm pessimistic right now, probably at the 55%. But once we hit bottom, we ain't nowhere to go but up.
Okay, we're going to close with each of you offering up one brief prediction for the future of the Republic. That's the only constraint. You can make a prediction of anything you want. Joe, you get to go first.
My prediction is that the Biden administration, which has said, and this is the key thing to understand about this administration, they believe in a rules-based international order. That is the slogan you hear them say all the time. You can even call this just performance theater, but it is dangerous. I think we're going to see United Nations action in our sovereign borders.
Jeff, can you top that?
My prediction will be, I'm going to focus on the right here. I'm going to focus on the conservative movement. What Trump is leading right now, people like Matt Gaetz, Scott Presler, they are leading movements to overthrow the Republican elite. This civil war is on the right is going to intensify, and I do think that the America First crowd will eventually be victorious. And my hope, this is more of a hope than a prediction, is that the right will finally start to go back to focusing more on local and state politics as well, to act as that wall against federal overstep.
Okay, Sarah, you get to issue the final prediction.
There will be a huge upheaval in the Biden administration. I do not see him lasting till the midterms. So when he goes down and she comes up the ladder, I think you're going to see a huge upheaval across the aisle, everywhere.
Well, that is it for our B&B panel on the future of the American Republic. And I want to thank Joe Schaeffer, Jeff Charles, and Sarah Cowgill, all at LibertyNation.com, where you can not just hear them or see them, but you can read them. So go ahead and do that. Thanks for joining us.